So Nintendo finally announced Star Fox Zero at E3 2015, which included a trailer, a playable demo on the E3 show floor, as well as several segments from Nintendo Treehouse Live that showcased most of the levels shown in the trailer even more in depth. So you know what that means, it's time to break it all down and see what secrets all of it might be hiding. Okay, so of course the entire Star Fox crew is back. We got Fox, Falco, Peppy, Slippy, and heck, even Rob. Big surprise, I know. So it's also probably not terribly surprising that, on the whole, the gameplay is pretty darn similar to Star Fox 64, featuring corridor-based levels interspersed with the occasional all-range mode and multiple vehicles, like the R-Wing and the Landmaster. And both of them handle pretty much exactly as they have before, being able to bank or roll to either side, and in the case of the R-Wing, able to perform U-turns and somersaults. But that doesn't mean the game's exactly the same, as there are two major new features. One, of course, is the gamepad's motion controls that allow you to aim independently the direction you're flying. And two is the ability to shapeshift from one vehicle into another with the press of a button, such as how the R-Wing can turn into the Walker, or the Landmaster into the Flying Grabmaster. But there is one major exception. The brand new Zero Wing doesn't appear to transform at all. But of course, it has a special feature all of its own as a replacement, the Direct Eye. Basically, the Zero Wing is able to lower a tiny robot to the ground that's tethered to the ship, which it can then control remotely in order to enter small areas and interact with objects you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Now, regardless of which vehicle you pilot, you'll still target enemies in pretty much the same way as Star Fox 64, using either your standard blasters or by using charge shots, which it can lock onto an enemy for a powerful homing attack. But this time, whereas the R-Wing can still only lock onto a single enemy at a time, the Landmaster can actually lock onto 3. And look, it even fires them in missile form, instead of the R-Wing's energy blasts. Now speaking of targeting enemies, the game still tracks the amount of enemies that you destroy. And just like before, charged shots still deliver a +1 bonus for every additional enemy destroyed within a single blast. Now the very fact that the enemy counter still exists very likely means that the medal system from Star Fox 64 will be returning too, which basically means you'll be rewarded with a medal if you earn enough points. In fact, at the end of the mission, we can see a high score screen, and the first place spot has 150 points, which just so happened to be the exact amount of points you needed in Star Fox 64 to earn the medal for Corneria. And we can see the exact same thing again in Titania. So if those are indeed the medal requirements, it seems the required amount of points for each level may be the same as they were in the original Star Fox 64. Now something else that returns from Star Fox 64 are the power-ups. But this is where we start to see some slight differences. Now first up we have the laser upgrade, which allows you to fire 2 blasts at the same time instead of just 1. But did you notice how the laser color also changed from green to blue? Now in Star Fox 64, that only happened when you got a second laser upgrade, which made the dual lasers from the first upgrade even more powerful. But this time, collecting a second upgrade yields no discernible difference. So could there really only be one level of laser upgrade this time around? Moving on, supply rings are also back and restore health when collected. And like before, they come in 2 colors, silver and gold. Now historically, silver rings have been pretty common, while gold rings were a little more sparse. But this time around, gold rings are even harder to come by. You see, even though the gold ring meter in Star Fox 64 only displayed 3 rings at a time, there were often far more than that in each level, and they weren't particularly hard to find back then either. And that's because they were more of a power-up than collectible, doubling your health for the remainder of the level when you found 3 of them. And if you managed to collect 3 more within the same level after that point, you'd gain an extra life. Heck, your gold rings would even carry over between levels, making it possible to start a level with up to 2 already in reserve. Now at first, gold rings seem to function exactly the same way in Star Fox Zero. After all, they still restore health, and the meter still only displays 3 of them. But check this out, when you grab all 3 in Star Fox Zero, nothing happens at all. The meter doesn't clear, and your health bar doesn't double. In fact, your life gauge appears to start in this game at the same size that it would increase to in Star Fox 64. So if the gold rings don't affect your health, what could they be for? We don't really know, but it does seem like they'll play a more important role than before, because there are now only 3 of them per level, which we base on the fact that we only ever see 3 of them at any given level, and even Nintendo's employees playing the game during the treehouse heavily suggested there were only 3 of them in each level. And then there's the fact that the ring counter doesn't reset when you find all 3. And not only are there just 3 of them, but they're more hidden than before too. For instance, in Corneria, the second ring is hidden behind the waterfall, and you really have to go out of your way for the third one, which is inside a building. So yeah, it looks like the gold rings have become a true collectible. So maybe you can cash them in for something. But as it turns out, gold rings aren't the only type of hidden collectible, because the Treehouse Live segments reveal a couple of new ones too. In Titania, for example, check out what happens when the player destroys a rock formation here. Yep, there's a collectible medal just behind it. And if you look close, we can see it has a Team Star Fox logo on it too. But what could that be for? It's probably pretty important since there only seems to be one of those per level at most. After all, it's the only one in all the footage at all. Now interestingly, the ribbon's blue and white color scheme is very similar to the medals from Star Fox 64. So could this replace the point-based medals that we mentioned earlier? If so, it's possible the point counter no longer awards medals, but something else instead, like maybe ranks. Unfortunately, it's all a giant mystery, and that continues with the next collectible as well. Because in the Zonis mission that Nintendo played on the treehouse, we can see a tiny collectible coin. And based on the fact that it's so tiny, it might just be a collectible that only the Direct Eye can grab. And this is supported by the fact that this is the only level we see such a coin in an area that only the Direct Eye can reach. But what could it be for? Again, we have no clue. But if it can indeed only be found by the direct eye, it would suggest it might have something to do with it. So maybe you need to use it to activate something within that same level. Or maybe you can use it to upgrade the direct eye in some way. Now oddly, that coin bears a striking resemblance to the allied medal from Star Fox Assault, which was also gold with a star emblem. Now in that case, it was awarded for completing a level with all your teammates intact, which clearly isn't related to what's going on here. But we do have one more idea, which we'll mention later. So altogether, that's 3 separate collectibles in the series that's generally only had 1 or less. Now despite all the additions, there does seem to be one odd omission. Smart bombs are nowhere to be found. You don't start with any, you don't collect any, and based on the demo, there appears to be no way to fire them even if you did, because all the primary buttons are already accounted for. So it seems smart bombs may actually be gone entirely, which would be a bit odd seeing as they've been a major part in almost every Star Fox game. In addition, even though Rob is back, it seems as item drops may not be, because between all the levels demonstrated so far, Rob doesn't raid you in with a drop once. But that does kind of make sense as smart bombs are indeed gone, since that's one less thing for him to provide you with. So that covers most of the basics, but one of the initial mysteries that was on everyone's mind is, what exactly is Star Fox Zero? And thankfully, Nintendo has since clarified what exactly it is. Specifically, it's not a sequel, it's not a prequel, and it's not a remake. Instead, as you might have guessed at this point, it's a reimagining of Star Fox 64, which means you'll revisit many of the same themes and worlds from that same game, but not exactly in the same way. And we can already see evidence of this in the levels shown off so far, which are both similar and distinct at the same time, to varying degrees. So let's go ahead and start breaking down all the levels shown off so far. And let's start off with Corneria, which is almost definitely the game's first level, and it's remarkably similar to Star Fox 64. After all, both levels begin with an ocean approach before reaching Corneria City, which of course is under attack, complete with damaged buildings in both versions. Pretty similar, right? And we're just getting started. For instance, do you remember how there was a secret boss fight in Star Fox 64, where if you followed Falco through some arches, he would lead you through a waterfall onto an alternate boss? Well, check this out. There's a locked door on the right, roughly at the exact same point in the level, right where the waterfall should be. Now, unfortunately, it's impossible to open that door in the demo, but we're pretty sure there'll be a way to get through it in the final version, especially because in the treehouse version of the level, a pilot for the Cornerian army flies directly over it, just like the secret boss did in Star Fox 64. Only this time, the Cornerian pilot radios in to say he's heading for the coastline, which might offer a slight hint of what's to come. Anyways, moving on, the level as shown in the demo culminates in the boss fight that takes place in all range mode, again like in the original game. But this time, the boss itself is completely different, or so it seems at first. But it might actually have a little more in common with that same boss fight in Star Fox 64 than it seems at first glance, because the monkey pilot here appears to be the same one from the original game. And not only that, but the spaceship's color palette, being red and green, is the exact same as the mech from Star Fox 64, although that is a pretty common color scheme found among Andress's army. Despite the similarities, the battle itself is quite different, featuring a spaceship instead of the mech from Star Fox 64. And not only that, there are actually 2 different ways to defeat him. The first, and easier option, is to take out all 4 sections of the spacecraft by targeting the turrets in each segment. But there's a catch. This method won't actually destroy the pilot. Instead, he'll retreat in his rocket, threatening that he'll get you next time. And as it turns out, it may not be long before we see him again. But more on that in a bit. The other option is to attack him from the inside, by flying into one of the tunnels that's revealed after taking out one of the spacecraft segments. You'll then want to transform into the Walker in order to target the spacecraft's core. And if you destroy the core, the entire thing will explode, taking out the villain, and he'll even spout the exact same line from Star Fox 64.
My Emperor! I failed you!
Now if you defeat the boss the conventional and easier way, it'll net you the usual mission complete screen at the end of the level. But if you defeat him the secret and harder way by flying inside, you'll earn a mission accomplished screen instead. But what's the difference? Well, thankfully we have Star Fox 64 to answer that one, because in that game the mission accomplished screen represented the best possible rating, meaning you either fulfilled every objective or met some secret requirement, whereas the mission complete screen meant you finished a level but you still missed something. So that rating is basically a reflection of what happened in the level, which in turn affects the game's story as well as what level you go on to next. And it seems like that continuity is returning in this game as well. Now in Star Fox 64, Corneria only led to 2 paths, easy and hard. But we have a feeling that this time around, Corneria may actually lead to all 3, similar to the original Star Fox and Super Nintendo. And we think that because there appears to be 3 exits to this level, and they are taking the boss out the easy way, destroying him completely, or heading through that locked door, which in the case of Star Fox 64 led to a secret boss, and then the hard route. Anyways, that's enough about Corneria. Let's move on to another level, Area 3, where you'll encounter Pigma, which we're guessing occurs pretty early in the game, based on Fox's surprise of seeing him, as well as dialogue when you defeat him where he states, this was just a warning. So it sounds like this may be Star Fox's first encounter with him too. But there is one odd thing here. Where's the rest of Team Starwolf? After all, we know they're in the game based on this scene from the trailer that shows their icons, being W for Wolf, A for Andrew, and L for Leon. But perhaps fittingly, Pigma doesn't appear in that scene at all, although it is possible he's just off screen. But assuming it's not, could this be a hint that Starwolf splits up at certain points in the game? So maybe if you destroy the boss in Corneria, you might have been redirected to an alternate level where you encounter Wolf, Leon, and Andrew instead. Maybe even that same level as this clip here. Alternatively, is it possible that Pigma split off from the group entirely? Maybe, but it seems unlikely since it's clearly affiliated with the boss here, who in turn works for Andross, just like Team Starwolf. And he's still flying the same style of ship as the other Starwolf members too. Anyways, back to the mission itself. So the goal of this mission is to protect the colony, which is a giant Halo-like spaceship you see in the background, from Pigma and the gang. But once you take him out, both him and the monkey will retreat. Which of course means you'll be seeing both of them again later in the game. Anyways, once they're both out of the picture, the Star Fox crew is free to enter the colony for phase 2 of the mission. And it's at this time that General Pepper informs you that Andross is trying to recover a weapon from the colony called the Gigarilla, and that you need to take control of it before he does. Luckily, you find the Gigarilla right away, but in order to recover it, you'll need a different vehicle. Oh, and in case you're wondering why it's called the Gigarilla, it might be because it looks like a giant gorilla, as shown in this scene from the developer's story segment. Which also likely means this was originally Andross's weapon, who was an ape himself. At any rate, you'll want to use a walker to explore the underground area, and for good reason, because you'll have to be a lot more deliberate in your movements down here. For example, there's one portion where you'll have to stand on a switch in order to open a door, but you'll then have to switch to your R-Wing in order to quickly fly through the opening before the door shuts again. Eventually, you'll reach a hangar containing the Zero Wing, but unfortunately, this is where the mission ends, as marked by the mission complete sign. And yet, we know there's more to it based on the developer's story footage. So we're pretty sure the mission ends here only for the demo, so instead, we're guessing this might be the start of phase 3 in the final game. And if we take a closer look at the developer's story footage, we actually get a better idea of how it'll play out. So clearly, once you have the Zero Wing, you'll return to the surface, and then we're guessing you'll have to use a direct eye somewhere near the Gigarilla in order to take control of him. Wait a second, take control of? How's that possible? I mean, based on this scene, he looks like more of a boss is chasing you down. That is until you take a closer look. Check this out. He actually takes out one of Andross's enemies right here. In addition, do you see the blue color in his eyes and on his chest? That's the same color blue as other friendly objects, like the inside of the supply rings right here. Which means he's actually a friendly in this scene. So we don't think he's chasing you. Instead, it looks like he's following the Zero Wing wherever you fly it. So yeah, we're pretty sure that's a result of hacking him using the direct eye. But we're not done yet, because let's take a closer look at the gamepad here, which shows the perspective of the direct eye itself. Because we can just barely see some on-screen markers that seem to designate some kind of zone. A zone that the Gigarilla appears to be walking right to. But our question is, do you actually want the Gigarilla to reach that area, or is your goal to keep it away? We think it might be the latter, because the Gigarilla appears to be heading in that direction of his own accord, and clearly isn't following the Zero Wing since it's behind him. So that could mean the Gigarilla is actually under Andross's control at the moment, and he might be heading for an evacuation area in which it can remove it from the colony. So if we're right, it's possible you may have to battle for control over the Gigarilla throughout this portion of the mission, in order to keep out of Andross's control and away from that marked area. And if you look even closer, you can see there's smoke coming out of the top of the Gigarilla too, suggesting it's taken heavy damage. But we're just not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. After all, maybe the goal is to destroy it before it can reach that marked area. Either way, we have a feeling this is another level with multiple outcomes. And that's where the next level comes in, being Titania. And Titania is also remarkably similar to the same level in Star Fox 64. I mean, it's still a desert, and you're still driving the Landmaster primarily on rails. But this time, there are giant tornadoes in the distance that toss all kinds of debris at you. Now, in the original game, you were on a mission to find Slippy, but this time it's Peppy who's running into trouble, as you'll have to rescue him from the Scrapworm boss at the end. Which also probably means that something must have gone terribly wrong in the mission just before this one. Just like it did in Star Fox 64, where Slippy was swatted away by a boss, causing him to crash land on the same planet. So because this mission is likely the result of a mistake, it probably appears on the easy path, like in Star Fox 64. But as it turns out, Peppy's crash landing might not be the only thing that's gone horribly wrong. Because did you notice that giant spherical structure that towers over everything in the background? It looks a little bit like the colony ring from Area 3, doesn't it? And by a little, I mean a lot. So assuming it is, that obviously means this level comes later in the game. But more importantly, what happened to the colony? Could that be what happens if Andross reclaims the Gigarilla? Maybe he destroys the colony and the remnants end up at Titania. And that could be what caused Peppy to crash land here too. Now the only odd thing is though, assuming the structure is in fact a colony, is that there's no nearby planets visible during Area 3. So maybe it gets teleported there instead. After all, we know warping is possible in this game, since that's how the mission on Zonis begins. And we learned from Rob and Peppy that this area used to be a former Cornerian base, before it was taken over by Andross. But we can't help but wonder, why the Fox have to warp in? I mean, Star Fox usually flies everywhere they go. Well, according to Rob, the entire base is covered by a shield, which you can actually see in the distance there. But we can also see from the direct eye that it doesn't actually cover the portion you warp to. So instead, we're guessing you warp in to avoid detection, because the level is largely based around being stealthy. After all, you have to use a Zero Wing to carefully fly around spotlights, and use a direct eye to hack terminals in order to lower shields. And you'll even be able to hack some spotlights too in order to disable them. Now, of all the levels we've seen that take place on planets from Star Fox 64, this one appears to be the most different by far. Okay, sure, the entire planet is still mostly water, and even the stealth aspect is ripped right from the original game. But back then, getting caught by a searchlight would result in the mission complete screen instead of the accomplished screen, and you would then be diverted to the planet Macbeth on the medium difficulty path instead of Sector Z in the hard difficulty. But we're pretty sure that's not exactly the same case here, because this time getting spotted seems like more of a temporary inconvenience, in which a group of enemies immediately pour in from the walls. But once you clear them out, the spotlights return to search mode, whereas in Star Fox 64, getting caught even once would change them all to red permanently. But there is one more final similarity to the original game, and that's the fact that Cat Monroe appears here as well, but it looks like she's been catnapped and it's up to you to free her. Unfortunately, we don't see how you do that, since they stopped playing shortly after in the treehouse. But we do have one more probably wrong idea. Do you remember that collectible coin you mentioned before, and how it bore resemblance to the Ally medal from Star Fox Assault? What if it is in fact used for Ally related tasks, such as needing it to rescue Cat here? Or maybe you can use it to pay for Ally related services later in the game. Again, we're just spitballing. At any rate, the only other part of the level we see is a player hacking a terminal to open a silo, which he then flies in, and that's where they stop. But we're guessing that energy beam is what's powering the shield, so it looks like you might be on the way to disabling it soon. Heck, maybe even Cat will help you out with that task. Either way, we fully expect her to pop up again in later missions, just like in Star Fox 64. Now beyond Zonis, there is still one more level Nintendo showed off during the treehouse, and that's Sector Alpha. And this level is kinda cool in how it foreshadows what comes later, since you can see a giant spaceship in the distance from the very start of the level, and then again on and off throughout the mission as you fight off other kinds of spacecrafts. And by the way, did you notice some of those spacecrafts actually bear the face of Andros himself? Yeah, that guy's not vain at all. Anyways, Team Star Fox isn't actually going in alone this time, as they're joined by the Cornerian army. You see those gray ships? Yeah, they're friendlies, and we know this because they're the same type of ship that flew over the locked door in Corneria. In fact, the commander in charge of the fleet here is even the same guy, and we can even see him react to having one of his ships destroyed, and then again when he's thanking Fox for saving another from the same fate. So if we had to guess, this might be the key to earning this level's mission accomplished screen, in that you might have to save all of the fleet's ships. Now eventually, you'll begin a slow approach toward that giant ship spotted throughout the level, and then you'll fly inside. Now interestingly, you'll actually pass through a hangar full of vehicles, but destroying them doesn't add to your point total, probably because they're unmanned. Now shortly after, you'll be automatically transformed into rocker mode by Rob, which suggests there might be points in the game where you won't be able to freely transform, although we don't know for sure that you can't turn into R-Wing in this case. Now soon enough, you'll reach the ship's reactor room, which looks pretty much identical to the reactor in the boss fight in Corneria. And once you take it down, the entire ship will begin to explode as Star Fox hightails it out of there. Now so far, a lot of the levels have been based on ones from Star Fox 64, but this one actually appears to be a remake of the Space Armada level from the original Star Fox. Check it out! For one, both levels leave you flying through a fleet of Andros' giant warships. And in both cases, toward the end of the level, a giant spaceship will come into view in the background as the battle wages on. And both of those spaceships, by the way, look remarkably similar. They're both angular, mostly flat, have a tail, and they both have a square entrance in the front. And once you reach the end inside, yep, you guessed it, a circular room containing the core, which fires energy balls at you in both games. And once you destroy it, the giant spaceship explodes in pretty much the exact same way too. Really, the biggest difference is they use the walker in Star Fox Zero instead of the R-Wing. So that's pretty dang cool to see the original Star Fox hasn't been completely forgotten, much like how the walker was lifted from the unreleased Star Fox 2. But there is one thing this level has in common with Star Fox 64, and that's the fact that when you enter the ship, you'll hear radio chatter from two of Andros' men, one of whom is superior to the other. And that dynamic is very similar to Area 6 in Star Fox 64, which also featured two boss characters, one who was the commander of the other, in charge of a giant fleet. But in this case, we don't think this level comes near the end of the game as that one did, because Venom isn't visible in the background as it was in Star Fox 64. Oh, and by the way, did you notice those two characters are also from Star Fox 64? Specifically, the train engineer from Macbeth, and the Shogun pilot from Sector Y. Regardless, we can't help but wonder this level is where the locked door in Corneria leads to. It would explain why that Cornerian army character is in both levels. And we also can't help but wonder the mission's title, Sector Alpha, might be a hint of what other levels to expect in the game. Because, as you might recall, Star Fox 64 had 3 levels called Sector X, Sector Y, and Sector Z. And as you might also know, Alpha means A in military speak, and is often accompanied by Bravo for B and Charlie for C. All 3 of which are of course on the opposite end of the alphabet spectrum compared to X, Y, and Z. So we have a feeling that Sector Alpha, along with Sector Bravo and Sector Charlie, could be the Sector X, Sector Y, and Sector Z replacements in this game. Phew! So that finally covers it for all the missions shown during the treehouse. But there are still a few clips left from the trailer and developer story segments that reveal 1 or 2 levels more. So first up, we have a pair of clips that show Star Fox taking on most of Team Starwolf, being Andrew, Leon, and of course Wolf. And as I pointed out before, Pigma seems to be missing, and that could be for story-related reasons. And if that's the case, it's possible this mission takes place at the same time as Area 3, just on a different difficulty path. Then again, as we said before, Pigman could just be off-screen. At any rate, they seem to be flying around the surface of an asteroid, and based on the level's curvature, we think this might be the first ever Star Fox level that you can fully circumnavigate, or fly all the way around, much like a planet in Mario Galaxy, which would be pretty darn cool. Now speaking of that asteroid, it's actually not just an asteroid, but it actually appears to be a base, or something mechanical at least. As you can see, strips of metal exposed in the surface. But the question is, what came first, the base or the asteroid? In other words, is it a base disguised to be an asteroid, or did they choose to build a base inside an asteroid? Either way, if it is indeed a base, we wouldn't be surprised if you enter it at some point. Or maybe the asteroid turns into a giant boss or something. Finally, did you notice you can see the sun in the background? I mean, it's huge, which we haven't yet seen in any other space level. And as you might recall, the sun is actually its own level in Star Fox 64, called Solar. Now back then, it was a possible 4th level, or about halfway through the game, which we're guessing would still be the case, seeing as this is a solar system after all, and the sun will obviously be at the center. So since Solar appears to be visible here, that suggests that this asteroid level not only takes place before that level, making it pretty early in the game, but also that Solar is likely a possible destination for beating this level. And that actually ties into Star Fox 64 beautifully, as your first encounter with Starwolf in Star Fox 64 was on the planet Ficina, which itself was one of the levels that immediately preceded Solar. Okay, now there's still one clip left that doesn't appear to fit into any of the other levels, and it's this one showcasing a battle to protect the Great Fox from incoming missiles, both small and gigantic. Which of course is nearly identical to Sector Z from Star Fox 64, where you had to protect the Great Fox from 6 similarly sized missiles. Only this time, it looks like the missiles can fire laser beams too. Now this level functions like Sector Z did. That could mean you may earn the mission accomplished screen for taking down every missile, whereas you get the mission complete screen if you miss some. Oh, alright, that finally covers it for every level we know about so far, which in summary is Corneria, Area 3, Titania, Zonis, Sector Alpha, the Asteroid one, and possibly the Great Fox one, making for 7 levels total. Now, if Star Fox 64 is anything to go by, which itself had 15 levels, that leaves at least 8 levels that we don't yet know anything about. And furthermore, if we assume every planet from Star Fox 64 returns, that probably means we can expect to see levels based on the ice planet Ficina, the arid planet Katina, as well as Macbeth, Aquas, and of course Venom. Now speaking of Aquas, the world is a little unusual in Star Fox 64 since it was an underwater level, owing to the fact that the entire planet is made of ocean. As such, it was the only level in the game in which you used a blue marine. So we can't help but wonder if the Blue Marine might be back for this game as well. And if it is, it gave us a crazy idea. Now as you probably remember, the only vehicle that doesn't have a proper transformation is the Zero Wing. But it also happens to be the only vehicle that has a propeller on the back, just like the Blue Marine. Yeah, you know where we're going with this. What if the Zero Wing could actually turn into the Blue Marine if a mission requires it? We can easily imagine the other 2 propellers rotating 90 degrees to face backwards to provide even more thrust. But like I said, it's just an idea. Alright, so we're almost done here, but there's still a few final details I wanted to point out. For one, both Peppy and Pigma mentioned Fox's dad, which, big surprise, likely means that James McCloud will be showing up at some point, much like he did in Star Fox 64. Next, we noticed that the version of Corneria that we played ourselves on the show floor is actually slightly different from the one that Nintendo played during the Treehouse Live segment. Because in the Treehouse segment, you were thrown right into the action right away with all kinds of enemies attacking, including these 2 giant chainsaw-like things. But in the demo we played, there aren't any enemies at the start at all until you reach Corneria. Instead, Peppy fills you in on the control basics while you test them out by flying through some rings. Now we're pretty sure this was simply for the demo, but we can't help but wonder that actually might be how the game starts the very first time, to help you get used to the controls. Or maybe, what if on top of the difficulty paths, there are actually different difficulty settings too? That would explain some odd things about the demo, such as how it was pretty much impossible to die, and why only a single laser upgrade fully powered up your lasers. But again, the differences we know they're probably just for the show floor demo. And speaking of the demo, there's one other portion of the game that was available to play that we haven't yet talked about yet, and that's training mode. Now there's not too much to say about it, but there are 2 things we noticed. One, the existence of the asteroids here might be a hint that the asteroid field level might be returning as well, which would make sense seeing as it was in both the original game and Star Fox 64 as well. But on top of that, we noticed that near the end of the training mission, your teammates will actually form up around you and follow your lead, which isn't something we've really seen before. So could this be a mechanic later in the game where all 4 of you fly in unison? Finally, let's take a closer look at the Zero Wing's direct eye. Yeah, he's pretty cute, right? But he also bears a striking resemblance to Rob the Robot, as in the Nintendo toy and Smash Bros. Character. But more than that, it also looks extremely similar to some of the enemy robots seen in last year's E3 demo, Project Guard, which we now know is officially part of Star Fox Zero. But if the direct eye is a good guy, why are the ones that look like him bad guys here? After all, we know you're playing as Team Star Fox due to their logo being on the security cameras. So maybe the robots were hacked by Andros to be evil? Or maybe Andros just stole the designs? Or maybe none of this makes sense and the final version will be entirely different, which wouldn't be terribly surprising either. And with that, we're finally done covering everything we can dig up in Star Fox Zero. But like usual, let us know if we missed anything by posting in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain.com for more on Star Fox Zero and other things gaming too.